and I also appreciate the fact that you try to end with some very concrete things that we could think about doing. Before I open up the discussion to the broader audience, I just wanted, if I could just ask the speakers to just reflect on a couple of things I picked up from the conversation. It seems to me that there's two large strands running through what each of you said in different extents in each of them. One is the extent to which the air issue captures the attention, particularly in a crowded mind space environment. There's lots of other things going on, lots of other pressing issues. Rohit, some lovely visuals for us. Well, not so lovely visuals, but that's the point. So that's how. So is it a question of capturing the attention? And Chetan talked about how, in a sense, getting the newsroom to focus on this is all part of that story. But then the other part of this that we didn't talk quite so much about, but I think is also salient, is what is the possibility for change, and how credible is that possibility for change? I think Ashutosh, you got to this the most when you said, these guys, the people you described, will look at this and say, is this a serious thing or not? Is this going to deliver? Is this going to waste my time? And I wonder whether is the main obstacle the attention story? Is that what we have to work on, or do we have to simultaneously work on the possibility story? Because my sense is also that people don't really see a way out of this. They see it as too big and too much beyond any individual, certainly, and even any single group, or even beyond something like the judiciary. So do we need to work on both of these aspects? And how are they linked? Is there more to be done on the attention side in order to get further along the possibility side? Yeah, please.
So one point I would like to make is that it's very often said that the politics of it would make a difference. Now, so far, we have no evidence of any urban change by changing politics. You've removed the BJP government, you've gotten a Congress government, you've gotten the Aam Aadmi Party, Delhi, Bangalore, Mumbai. No, electricity is a privatization issue. But I'm saying in the urban infrastructure, every year Bombay gets flooded. It's seen this happen through several governments. No matter which government you elect in Delhi. So it's really a question of administrative mechanisms that need to change rather than the political party. Because the political party comes and acquires the same bureaucratic mechanisms that it got it, that the failing of which got it into power in the first place.
Sorry to interrupt, but just to be very clear, are you suggesting that making it an electoral issue is not going to be that useful?
No, I'm simply saying that enough. That will certainly not be enough, because we've done that. You've removed governments over various issues. See, the thing is that it's very easy to divert these political issues within minutes in India by making them into some identity issue. It'll go, you can make it. But the primary thing that needs to change is the administrative mechanisms. That I think we need to look at. You think parents are not concerned? They're concerned, but what do? They end up going and buying an air purifier or a mask. Because they can't change. They can rave and rant and go to their right and send petitions over change.org or write letters to their next MLA. But the MLA's voting is unlikely to be affected by this. It is going to be voted by, who's the leader? Do you like this particular leader, that particular, which community you are? The identity issues play such a significant role that putting our minds into making this a political issue is less beneficial than finding ways of making administrative mechanism changes, because you have to go through the root of the problem and how the problem emerges, how to fix it. For example, very often, and I'm just take this longer to just make this brief point, is that parents want their children to play. Now, different suggestions are given, why can't they play in the afternoon, why can't they play? No, but there's the tuition. In the afternoon, they go for tuition. When they come back, Nanaji is sitting in the park, the ball will hit him. It's not that simple. So, there's only that much space. If you delineate those spaces and they are encroached upon, who will enforce? We need to look at the administrative mechanisms. That's one thing. When it comes to the business aspects of it, well, I have a view on that and we can talk about it. But
there were a lot of nods at Nanaji getting hit with the ball in the park.
I led an agitation about that, so I know. I mean,
on you were on Nanaji's side or the other side?
Kids.
Okay, good.
I went
Glad
up to the
hear
mayor.
it.
I got some laws changed also, rules changed over it. A big
Can you
fight
send me a copy, please?
I will send you a whole story.
Rohit, can I invite you to comment on that, and then we'll open, and then maybe if Chetan wishes, then we'll open it up.
Yeah, just a couple of things. I think by and large, we can safely say there is a lot of attention on air, right? There is a lot of attention. It's like Chetan mentioned, the coverage is fairly comprehensive in terms of the television media, in terms of newspapers, in terms of campaigns, and so on. There are some issues, like I mentioned here, how it translates into Hindi vernaculars and others. That's an issue. But when you talk to folks, everyone knows the kind of environment they're inhabiting, right? I don't think that's the issue so much. The question, of course, is you very rightly said that everyone in their own space feels somewhat helpless. Whether it is someone living in Okhla or even someone who perhaps has the ability to buy a purifier, but then what kind of life is that, right? What kind of quality of life is that? But I feel just in our context, in terms of the possibilities of change and what perhaps we should prioritize, there are a couple of things I can just throw out there and invite people to comment on. I think we have to prioritize. While this discussion on the causes and getting better information and data out there, that can go on, right? That will go on, but we have to absolutely prioritize health. Health has to be the discourse or the point that sort of brings together advocates, activists, and different groupings that, for instance, that Ashutosh talked about. And there you can perhaps connect with the government as well, because there has been investment into that sort of primary healthcare in Delhi, at least in Delhi. And if there can be some sort of credible model that can be then created, where air enters into the picture much more directly than it does right now, perhaps that can be something that can be talked about. A second thing that again has been mentioned is school children. I don't quite know exactly how, but again, that is one other thing that has been prioritized by Aam Aadmi Party, right? And they have quite openly, they solicit suggestions related to how the school experience can be changed, how principals and teachers can be involved in larger social change, right? So that's a second thing. And a third, which I don't think has happened so much, we tend to treat the air pollution, the air issue in Delhi as a uniform general issue, but there are clearly highly stressed communities. There are clearly spaces where people are facing greater risk than others, and they have to be identified, they have to be understood, they have to be made part of the debate in a very direct manner, and in terms of different constituencies.
I'm just going to open it up, but before I do that, actually, I had warned him in advance. We have with us Kirk Smith at the end of the table there. We had actually originally wanted to get Kirk for one of these seminars, but he goes back and forth. So Kirk Smith is probably the single person who's brought indoor air quality to the attention of the public health community, and has been very involved with air and health-related conversations in many countries. So I wanted to just sort of draw on your presence here, Kirk, if you wouldn't mind giving us a minute or two of your reflections on this, perhaps also reflecting on the international context, and then we'll open it up.
Okay, certainly I appreciate very much what you guys have been saying. Just my background, I started working here in India on air pollution in 1981. We did the first measurements in the world in India of what we now call household air pollution, which hasn't been mentioned here, and is actually a larger exposure than, although we have terrible exposures in Delhi, I live here too, but it's actually larger in rural areas. So you're talking about equity or issues, and I think we've gotten this on the radar a bit internationally, and India has an immensely aggressive program now through the Ministry of Petroleum to provide clean fuel to households. It has pluses and minuses, but it's historically massive. And that has an outdoor air pollution component to it, because we now recognize that outdoor air pollution is about 30% due to households in this country. So people, your list of things up there didn't even mention households. It's actually the largest single sector on all the studies. Now in Delhi it's a little bit less because, it's different than the average Indian location, but it's still probably 20% of the Delhi pollution is from households. So solving the household air pollution problem, which helps the household, the villager, usually a poor person, almost by definition a poor person, also helps the outdoor air pollution in the country. Now that recognition, you mentioned the Chinese program. The Chinese program is really interesting. And there's many things about it that, India could learn. I should back up a bit. I run now a new center here called the Collaborative Clean Air Policy Center. It's located in the Habitat Center. We're just starting up. We are just going to be hiring people and so forth, so we're new. But one of our jobs is to try to represent to India what is happening in other places. And one of the major places for that is, of course, what's happening in China. And this new program in China that somebody mentioned, one of the components of it is they've recognized households as part of the problem. So they are going to in the next 3 years, they're going to be reducing household solid fuel use, which is the problem, in their case coal plus biomass, by 80%. But the other thing they've done, one of the other things, is that they've recognized that the air pollution problem, Delhi cannot possibly solve its own air pollution problem. It's just physically impossible. The air pollution doesn't pay any attention to political boundaries. It goes where the wind takes it. And at least half the air pollution in any one day comes from somewhere else. So, and then sometimes a year, like the crop residue burning period, it might be more than that. So, the physical nature is that you can't solve the problem yourself. You have to extend the system boundaries, if you like, the monitoring and control boundaries, to an area that's something like the natural air basin. And, we know that that's going to have to include at least the surrounding crop burning areas, but it probably is even larger. If you look at satellite photographs, the entire Ganges River basin fills up with air pollution. Delhi's in the middle of it somewhere, but you can't even see Delhi. So what does that mean? Personally, I think, and this is a lesson that was learned just recently in China. The new program has extended the boundary for control to control the air pollution in Beijing. They have to extend the boundary 1,000 kilometers in every direction because the pollution comes in. In the U.S., where I live, in California, we have an air pollution control region, it's a Bay Area Air Quality Control Region, that covers 55 cities. And that regional office can fine those cities, can actually put the mayor in jail. They don't do that, but they could legally do that. They've got authority over 55 cities. That's in Europe, of course. Those system boundaries have to include separate countries because the place is small. In the eastern U.S., it includes multiple states. In California, big enough that you can do it all in one state. But this is, sort of hidden in some of what all of you were saying is that I see outdoor air pollution. Let's leave aside household air pollution for the moment. Outdoor air pollution is largely a governance issue. It's not as if India's poor anymore. It's not as if we don't know what to do. It's not as if we need magic new technologies. Is that right? Anybody believe that? No. There are plenty of technologies out there. It's this governance issue. And I'm not an Indian governance person, but I can see it myself, but I don't know what to do about it. I think partly this big boundary issue has to probably come from the PMO. Only the PMO could actually create an entity that has authority over, let's take the Bay Area example, 55 cities. But that's probably what you need here. So in any case, this is, and then let me just say one final thing. There's a revolution happening, and that relates to this, civil society, if you like. And the revolution is coming through, finally, we're developing low-cost monitors that work. So China has now instrumented 100 cities with 15,000 low-cost monitors. So each city has, 150 monitors. Think how you could understand pollution here in Delhi if you had 150 monitors, plus the regulatory monitors that the government runs. that, that provided information to the city on what's going on locally, or in any number of other cities. And these low-cost monitors are 20 times cheaper than regulatory monitors. They're not cheap. They're not something you and I can buy, but they're much cheaper than regulatory monitors, and so in California, which has always been the leader of air pollution control measures, and I say that in a biased way, I'm a Californian, but they've established a very new program, and what they're doing is they're training community groups to use these low-cost monitors, and they're going to be developing regulations that relate to particular hotspots of exposure in local communities. This is, it's just happening now. They just passed this legislation late last year. So this is, if you think about, it's a question of whether, the organizations that operate, not just NGOs, but the organizations that operate in communities like you're talking about, whether they would be interested, whether they could have the capacity to do some of this monitoring themselves. It's a very interesting question. But for the first time, the technology allows for it.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much, Kirk. Okay, so now we're going to just turn to a round of questions, maybe take them in batches of 3, and try and be very concise with your question, please. Daljit was the first. Who else had their hands up? I saw a couple more hands earlier. Yeah, at the back there, and then back there.
Okay, just following up on what Kirk said. Can you hear me? So it's really, I think some of the things the panelists have talked about is, those are sort of things that might help, but it's this. What we're missing is how complicated the air pollution air pollution problem is. So it's really a governance issue. And one of the things, it's actually, because this is a kind of problem that requires a long-term solution. It's not something you can do very quickly. You can't just ban something and say, okay, we'll do it. It's a very difficult problem. And actually the politicians will not do it because it's not in the interest of any politician to do it. Because remember, what is a politician's horizon? It's 5 years till the next election. And actually, the Jagdish Sagar had a great paper on this when they did the power sector reforms. And he said, really, no government really has an incentive to do something like that. And, media can help, but I think media can really just, can help put the issue on the agenda, which I think the media has done very well. But there's much more that needs to be done. And what we need to do is, there's this really a lot of work that needs to be done. There needs to be, these sort of studies. See, in order to to make it easier for the politicians, they must have something ready to implement. Because if you, okay, so I think it's important that we have, and we actually have no one has really done a study about how do we handle, no suggestions about how to do it. I mean, in a integrated way, not this, that, and the other. Because if you have to put artificial lakes around, that's a huge thing. And you have to do a benefit cost analysis. Is that the best thing to do? So I think, there needs to be some ready-made things that once a politician is interested in doing something, there's something off the shelf that he can pick up and hit the ground running.
And I have worked with the grassroots level also with Hazard Center. Currently, I'm working with the with Datta sir. Can you switch on the mic, please? Yeah. So my concern is that if we talk, like in Hazard Center has conducted the air pollution study, seeing the health of the children. When we went over there and we asked, when the report came in of the air pollution, we talked to the school teachers. So we said we would like to share the report. So they said that, sorry, we can't allow you. Why? Because they said that if we will allow you, the parents will come and they will say that our kids are affected by the air pollution. So we cannot let you do that. Another thing, another issue regarding when we work in Singrauli, where there's a hell lot of data about how air pollution is affecting the health. But when you take these data to the court, they says that how can you correlate the air pollution with the health? Because there can be enough the reasons which can be correlated to it. When we talk about the local peoples, they say that we know about the air pollution, we are suffering with it, but what can we do about it? So civil society is beyond the NGOs what we are working, but if we talk about the mass media about, then how much the people are approachable towards the media also. We are not talking about the people who are dealing with this problem like every day, severely dealing with this problem every day, and their health has been affected. They are aware about it that their health is affected, but how much this thing has been taken seriously? Air pollution has become like a day-to-day topic of a conversation, that this could have been happened because of the air pollution. But till the time the mass movement will not come within the ground, it will not have any impact on the policies also. So it has to come like a rape case, it has to come like air pollution. Then it will make an effect on the government and on the people's life. We all are, most of us must be from Delhi. We all are still living over here. And we know the impact on our health still. Do we ever think that let's go back to our hometown and it will be a better idea? But then what about the opportunities of work, better school for your kids? So I mean, it has lots of layers to deal with it. We just cannot say कि, okay, let's do this, then it will solve. No, no policies will can do it. All the organizations at different level has to come together to deal with this problem. But before that, we have to acknowledge this fact that this is a problem.
I would like to link what Kirk has raised, the revolution of low-cost sensor technology, and what Ashutosh has raised, the limited effectiveness of civil society or the RWAs in influencing policy or actions. So let's assume a case we have low-cost sensor technologies deployed here in India across cities, and people are aware of the air quality data in their region. But given the power or the power dynamics which is present in the country in terms of the power which civil society have, there are RWAs. So I wanted to understand what actions can civil society take, RWAs, in order to influence policy. From your experience, is there any federation of RWAs who has gone to government and has resulted in some policy change or action?
So, my question is more, it's stemming from the politics which is already embedded in media and journalism here in our country. So, I mean, there are different reports published by different agencies and organizations, and I mean, because of the embedded politics and some uh, prejudices and judgments about what the politics scenario looks like, there is a lot of misguided information to the public, which basically leads to different. I mean, it's good to have different opinions and different sorts of information in front of you, but then being misguided by it is another thing. So, and that's what's happening a lot more in media right now with air pollution coming in the headlines. There is a lot of coverage on how bad it is and how it has effects on health, etc. There's also misguided information about, okay, this is getting better, this area is doing well. So as a reader or as a viewer, if I'm seeing both of these together, then I'm sort of confused whether I should demand for something more or I should be okay with, fine, this area is doing fine, so this policy maybe, it'll take time to reap effects and things. So just...
We turn back to the panelists, but before we do that, maybe just sort of let me try and tie a couple of these things together. One thing that concerns me a great deal is, we've seen a ramping up of public attention. We've seen sort of alarm bells being pressed in the media only episodically during October, November, and so on. There's not a mass movement. There's not a cogent plan. But we do have some reactive efforts. And those reactive efforts don't actually achieve anything, partly because they're done badly, but partly because they can't possibly be expected to in such a short time frame. And so then you have disillusionment among the public and a sense of fatalism that gets in, and then the colleagues you talked about say this is this is not something to be taken seriously. My question then is, how do you get out of that cycle? Because I think that cycle can keep us spinning in place for a long time.
So, we don't have clear answers to that. We do not really at this point know what would prevail, whether political pressure would prevail or better institutions would prevail, because they're not that easy to separate. And the lady there just said that if a Nirbhaya kind of anger was to be expressed, it might change things. I suspect not, because the mechanisms that you require to change, it's a governance administrative kind of problem. But one needs to change the intent of the government. Now, my sense in this is that just now, for example, you were saying that people need to, sort of take on to greener technologies. Those technologies are available, but when business as usual is working, why would you take on new technology? It's only when you make the cost of doing business in the old manner prohibitive that you punish it or penalize it. Would people then, necessity is the mother of invention, they will start picking up new solutions. But if you let that continue, if you let the business of trucking waste continue to landfills, you take out these contracts year after year, you do not penalize non-segregation, you do not, why would, this, even today in this order is talking about an awareness program. But kitni awareness chahiye re? Kya aware, kitna? How much awareness? People are aware. People know there is, at least in the better colonies of South Delhi, people know that they have to segregate their waste. But they won't do it because there is absolutely no enforcement. There are 272 municipal wards in Delhi. Not even in one ward has the municipal corporation been able to enforce their own when the government does not enforce its own policy. So somehow what we have to achieve actually is, monitoring is one thing. All that I don't know, that's not the domain I come from. What we have to, our target is to get the government to change its attitude. Now, and I don't really know it, I don't have clear answers of how to do it. I mean, it's very simple to say, okay, we do this, it'll change. But no, it's not that simple. It's not something that is happening easily. How do we get the government at the highest echelons of power get serious about it? Like Kirkji just said that this changing of fuels has made, yes, it would make a difference. So that's the kind of, at some level, that's the kind of change we need to make. I mean, in terms of change of fuel, or in terms of providing alternate fuels to households. At the level of Delhi, a lot of problem is to do with dust, which comes in from Rajasthan. So tree plantations have to be done in the west and northwest of Delhi, but they started planting it in east. Now, why are you planting it in east? Who asked you? So, the questioning has to be more on the administrative mechanisms. I've urged the press also several times, do not call that you'll call two politicians, one from Aam Aadmi Party and one from the BJP, and they will fight without knowing anything. They don't know. What will they say? The problem actually is at the level perhaps of the commissioner of the municipal corporation of Delhi. You will not question him because he is not open to questioning. Usually those are the conduct rules of officers. But the problems lie there. If a politician comes into after an election, it is a very simple thing, and this would be of interest to you. In a municipal ward, what does he promise you? I will make sure you don't get bitten by mosquitoes. I will clean up your parks. I will make sure your garbage is lifted. Now, please tell me what good reason there is for him to be lying to you. He actually wants to do it. Why would he want you get bitten by mosquitoes? But when he comes there into that system, into that administrative mechanism, he realizes it's not that simple, because he, despite being accountable to the people, is not empowered. The commissioner who's empowered is not accountable to the people. Now when he goes, uska kaam nahi ho raha. Now, then he comes back to you. Abhi ho raha hai. Yeah, all the storytelling will start then. There is a lot of, we have to look at the administrative mechanisms for pretty much many of these problems. And particularly air pollution, it's not something that RWS can solve. Suppose I was to monitor, and we did put a monitor. For the first 2 days, people would respond on WhatsApp saying, very bad, terrible, how terrible, what sort of lives are we living? Our children are getting evicted. After the fourth day, because what does he do?
Can I just pose a counter a question here? I mean, I think that if we have to, like with many problems in India, if we have to wait to solve air pollution until we solve our administrative setup, we will be here a very, very long time. So is there another pathway? And I guess the question is, for example, let me just take and I'm sorry as the chair I'm interjecting, but I think it's a useful conversation. The waste segregation. Nowhere in the world, to the best of my knowledge, does waste segregation happen because there is strong enforcement. Waste segregation happens as a normative change because people becomes a matter of course. People realize that this is what one should do. You don't have people walking around with fines and so on. So, my question is, what if there was a way in which there was and perhaps Rohit is best placed to answer this, if in fact we understood, would 10 to 30%, depending on the season, waste burning contributes to air pollution. Waste segregation would do this, that, would actually decrease the wedge by so much. That became part of an information campaign through our WAs where people begin to understand that we can chip away at a small piece of the problem by doing this. And then you have monitors that are then sophisticated enough to actually say what are the sources of different waste, and over a period of 2 or 3 years, waste segregation, you start seeing the contribution of waste come down to air pollution, and you start seeing some feedback loop between effort and outcome. Because at the moment, I think we don't have a feedback loop between effort and outcome, and I don't think we're going to get it only by waiting for the administrative machinery to change. So maybe you can react to that, or maybe Rohit would like to speak. And there are lots of other questions. I don't mean to hijack the conversation, but I'm using my prerogative as a chair to stick this in.
Honestly, without law enforcement, is not going to change. Bluntly put, it won't. It won't, because even in your municipal parks today, horticulture waste can be composted. But the municipal parks are not owned by the RWA, they're owned by the municipal corporation. Now they carry that waste away to a landfill that goes to the Okhla landfill from South Delhi. You can keep complaining. In household segregation compared to the West is a different phenomena here. We segregate waste mostly. The kabadi comes and takes away most. We do that segregation. It's at the final level, is the Tetra Pak, Panni, food level, that segregation. So you can't make the comparison of segregation in the West as it is there. And there too, if you do not, the point is, what if you do not segregate there? You'll be punished. So what I would say is, in Delhi, even if they don't enforce on a regular basis, what the government could actually put out there, and I'm making the suggestion, the government should say, you will be subject to a random check. One of the complaints is, come to my house, and you've just checked me and not somebody else. But if the government was to say that a random check will start happening, and will be fined this much money, it will, see, the point is, there is an existing business model of waste. Do you know that the rag picker, the kude wala who comes, does not want you to segregate waste? Because he feels threatened that this will take away a lot of his...
The point is, first of all, why do we need to segregate the waste? Because in India, most of the waste is the wet waste. So first question is going to be asked from the people कि हमें segregate ही क्यों करना है? क्योंकि हमारा waste तो गीला है. If we want to put in the waste to energy power plants, then it's a different issue, but people don't know what is the waste to energy power plants only. When you go and talk to the rag pickers, they will say कि if you are going to segregate, आप segregate करते ही नहीं हो क्योंकि before that you also want to sell to the kabadi wala and make some money out of it. So what is the point of segregating the waste? People have no idea about it. So you have to first make them importance कि you have to segregate the waste because of this. By the time this comes, the concept gets over.
I think what we learned also is, as we learned from the previous 6 or 7 seminars, that each of these wedges for air pollution has a very complex political, economy, administrative, legal. Each of them is like a major problem. So
it's also a business problem.
Yeah.
There are existing business models of waste.
Absolutely.
Can I just add one thing? I'm from Care for Air, and everything that everybody has said here, I can't agree with it more, but the common thing is what Dr. Kirk-Smith said, is that there has to be that intention and that central empowered and accountable authority, which we as a group, an advocacy group, have been constantly asking for. And I think the one way that I can't think of any other way, because there is also that separation of that collective cost. We are all bearing that collective cost of breathing bad air, but the private profit that goes into it. Even when you take a simple air purifier, I clean my bedroom with an air purifier, I throw the filter in the landfill, it goes into everybody's lungs, but my room is clean. So that one thing is that separation, but all of that is connected to the fact that if today our Prime Minister said Swachh Hawa in addition to, because we need the other stuff as well. But if that became sort of the national program and the national chant, and all of our citizen advocates and all of us kind of made it that single point program, that first you give us that air that we need to breathe to live. There's case that you're talking about, the firecrackers case. There's just been today in court, because that's my colleague who's from Care for Air, the 3 toddlers, it's their case that has gone, and there is some judgment. He was trying to call me to tell me what happened. Those are small parts of the big puzzle. If we could just get the Prime Minister to take, sort of that central theme. And I know that they are interested, because we are getting feelers from the back. The PMO is interested in knowing, because now elections are coming. So I think the only thing I can think of, because I've been working in this area for 4 years, is that we have to all ask for that simple, straightforward, please get us that empowered. If this party can get GST done, if they can demonetize, and if they can do all of this stuff, they create UAI, they create the Aadhaar card, you think they can't have one authority for clean air? I really don't know. It's impossible that they can't have that. We just need to all ask for that one thing, because these are all parts of that bigger picture.
Just one quick comment. We just said in the last couple of hours at the Supreme Court, we spoke about the government attitude. What has happened is that the centre, and I'm just reading this out from our court reporter, the centre has told the Supreme Court that the court should restrain itself from passing orders on PILs on subjects like pollution and garbage. And this is because the country is facing multiple problems, and the judiciary should maintain restraint, and the government has issues on budgets and things. So that's where our government is.
Yeah, and the other thing is that if you follow this, and I'm sure you do very closely, day before yesterday there was a judgment where the Supreme Court just told the concerned departments, and they said, why don't we start putting this garbage in front of the LG's house? So that's the kind of frustration that the judiciary is looking at currently. We're at the Supreme Court, and we're now tired of hearing all sorts of air pollution and pollution this and pollution that. Nothing is being done. And you're expecting governments to do something against this? Well, like the gentleman said, putting it very blatantly, and I'm sorry to shell this out to you, but where money and economics is concerned, environment takes a back seat. I think it takes about number 4 on this. And then you ask people to prioritize their daily lives, like he said again. Well, I live in Old Delhi. I live in a Haveli which is about 300 years old. It's seen Delhi go from A to probably Z and going to negatives now. Nobody is really concerned about the environment. So my neighbor would suddenly start building in the middle of October when there's already so much of dust and pollution going on without even worrying anything. And yes, I can go to court against him, but then the court will again say, "Tum log phir aa gaye." It's like that.
Mr. Ashutosh's thing on enforcement, not just let the polluter pay, but enforce at least the rules that you have. That is very important, I think. To ask for that, because the administration is constant, the parties keep changing, but if our message is always the same, whichever party is in power, we want clean air. That is all we need to say, that we want it, and that's, the message, I think, has to be consistent. So even if they are tired of you coming in court and saying, but you have to say, I needed to breathe. Can't help it.
But how many of us really want it?
So we have to get
that movement ahead, that we want the clean air.
I think I was at one school the other day, and I won't mention the school. It's a huge school, very posh and everything else. And yeah, the discussion on it was basically pollution, how the kids, and kids are very, you know how children are. They're very enthusiastic about saving the environment and wildlife and the birds and everything else. And one of them actually stood up. This is a class 9 student, okay, and said, the problem with us is, and I was like, no, why don't you tell me? So he's like, our religious books are about 100 pages and our civic sense book is about 10. This is a class 9 student, and I was like, whoa. So let's make our civic sense books about 100 pages, and let's tell our kids that this is what, because kids, when they come back home and they tell me as a father that, look, Dad, you're not supposed to spit over there, you're not supposed to stub your cigarettes over here, things like that, it makes more sense to me, rather than the government coming and telling me, don't do this and don't do that. I, on my turn, will tell them, I'll take you to court for telling me how to perform my rights.
Any further comments on regarding this animated discussion? Either of our panelists or this after? One little thing I just wanted to flag, I'll just take a second, and especially for the legal community,
That the West took the route of class action suits to change things and torts litigation. We have nothing of the kind here. We took the PIL route, which then gets into some kind of moral space also. So, I mean, you can't sue anybody for damages for having destroyed your lungs. There's nothing you can do. Unlike the West, which some areas you could. I mean, there is some sort of class action sort of. So I know, maybe, I don't know whether some push is required in that direction from people like you, at least to begin to raise that issue. There is no sort of damages claim sort of litigation or asking the government to pay damages for what it ought to have done in the first place. So it's all into, we will do it, we are wanting to do it, it's all, we are interested, everybody's good, but it's not happening. And so maybe that's just one of the thoughts that, it's just difficult, but.
So very quickly to respond, and I actually have a question for the panelists after that. Just to respond to Ashutoshji, actually, there are the lawyers in the room, but I mean, there has been litigation, environmental litigation, where damages have been awarded, and which have also been challenged subsequently in higher courts. But you're right to mention that it's not at the level that we hear of the Erin Brockovich level that we have, but it's not at that level, but it is, there is certainly space for it in the current Indian law, but for whatever reason, you're right to point out that we've chosen the PIL route and not the, which doesn't lead to the kind of damages litigation that we hear of. My question actually to the panelists was that, and I think it kind of ties in what, I mean, how do we keep this momentum going? Unless, and I think Navroz was talking about kind of having a, building a loop, we'll stay in that loop. How do we make people feel that they have something in it? And unless there are these incremental so-called successes, I feel that sooner or later, Dilliwalas or not, are going to tire of this issue and move on. And it's great that we managed to drag this on for about 3 to 4 years, unfortunately managed to drag it on. But I'm just wondering if you had specific suggestions in the way that not just we as a research institution, but many of us who come from very different, can keep this fight going, because we need those incremental successes. Otherwise, I think it's going to become a fairly depressing fight that we are going to give up pretty soon on. So if you had any suggestions.
Well, I'm not really an expert in this, but I think to my mind, some kind of a platform, creation of a platform where all these various inputs from scientists, from data analysts, from citizen groups, from lawyers could actually be put together. It's, as I said, it's easier said than done, but something which would inform people, reach out to people beyond, to go back to my example of parents, of teachers, of doctors, that might be of some use. And to consciously do that, not to bombard them with messages, like you said, for day 1, day 2, day 3, and everything is bad news. But maybe one little factoid or one little bit of news that you could use today, like today's a good clean day, make the best of it, or don't do this today because it's likely to be, or this is a kind of a health warning, or this is how you can protect yourself. Just so that that flow of information creates a lot of awareness, and that, this is affecting me on a daily basis. I don't think it'll ever die out. The interest in this entire topic is not going to die out, because we're going to have the winter months, we're going to have asthmatic attacks, we're going to have people on steroids, we're going to have people dying. The message will sink through. I mean, just as an anecdotal thing, the other day, not the other day, it was in winter, a shopkeeper in Jorbagh told me how his uncle had died, and I said, what did he die of? He said it was very sudden. And he said that it was because of air pollution. He got a heart attack in some village outside Delhi. So the awareness, I found that very interesting, that the awareness that he could link the two and say that it was because of this was quite insightful to my mind. Yeah.
I would agree. I would agree that this, to get despondent and think the public is not raising enough noise is not. What we do, I think everybody here is in some way a leader in this arena. And what we do, we must do with greater fervor. And we must do with, जिसको हम लोग हिंदी में कहते हैं कि नियमित रूप से करिए, keep on and on. It will tip over. It has to, it must. But it is incumbent upon us not to stop and keep on doing this. Because we know no other way. So we must act upon what we know right now. And what we do not know will follow. But it will come. And we must all do it. There are platforms, and believe me, there are a lot of people doing this. It's not happening. It's not sort of tipping over. But it will. It will, and I urge all of you not to sort of, I think each one of us must keep on and on and on. And it will change. It has to.
There's no option, no? Fight or flight.
Yes, couple of things. Someone actually mentioned PMO. So I got this factoid just today that the government of India, just Delhi alone, they spent 36 lakh rupees on air purifiers last 3 years. Right? The PMO, the Prime Minister's office, has spent 7 lakh rupees on air purifiers. They have some 25 high-end air purifiers. So clearly, they see it as a problem. Yeah. The question is what the solution is, right, of this. Yeah. So maybe I'm parroting this point again and again, but I'm actually shocked that there isn't a movement for healthcare in the city. Like, where it is quite shocking. Perhaps because a lot of us have access through our employment or our savings, but out-of-pocket expenses are absolutely mind-boggling, and people just just teeter on the edge, basically, in terms of their saving and future sort of life chances, basically depending on how whether they are unwell in the city. The thing is that in spite of all of this, public healthcare is in a shocking state of affairs. And I think regardless, like I said earlier, the complexity of the situation and all of that, be as it is, just something around public healthcare has to be the top priority of anyone interested.
Okay, great. Mukta, I think we better wrap up. If you have a pressing 30-second comment, please.
This sort of air thing is one among a whole bunch of issues that goes into this commons versus individual sort of conflict. So as long as we keep framing the issue as an issue of air, it's something that's beyond my individual capacity. But the minute we frame the issue as something that is affecting me, it takes the conversation in a different light. So, taking on what Rohit said, if we just talk about public health, the kind of topics that we talk about, we're not talking about asthma. We're still maternal health care, nutrition. There are those very typical public health care conversations, even though doctors in the last 3 years have been talking so much about. So, that sort of bridge in conversation, and even among civil society groups, that sort of switch from air is this problem that is insurmountable because it's a governance issue to it is affecting me and therefore I need to talk about it. There's something that I think can be done in that space. That was my comment.
Okay, great. Thank you all very much. We've run a little bit over, but clearly there was an appetite to do so. Just by way of, certainly not summary, but just by way of an observation, we have a lot of strongly held views even in this room as to what leading edge of a solution is, even if it's not the silver bullet. I think everybody acknowledges there are other things as well, but there are strongly held views. They range from key elements being sensors leading to more transparency and data, to a comprehensive off-the-shelf plan to make sure that we have to take advantage of a political moment, to a central empowered authority that has the force to apply things, to reform of the administrative mechanism, because that's where the rubber hits the road, to a mass movement because that will generate the motive power to change. So all of these things are clearly necessary. I'm not sure we have a very good answer as to how you combine them, but I think it's important for those of us who are passionate about this not to necessarily hold on that tightly to our favored solution, but to see how they actually complement each other. It's maybe a first observation, but a second observation is, I think something that Ashutosh said, that, if people have an easier path to doing something, they will do it. So if they have something that's more costly, either in financial terms, time terms, transaction terms, effort terms, they will. Unless they think the cost, the benefit that they'll get from changing is worth the cost. And that's where I think the information and public awareness part of the story is really important. And to pick up from what Mukta said, that's not going to happen in abstract terms because of air. It'll happen because of, I think there'll be a separate conversation in transport, separate conversation in waste, separate conversation in dust, and so on and so forth, where people will be willing to, that we have to get to the point where people are willing, people and communities are willing, I think, to make that change, take on that cost, because they see that there is a marginal gain. But right now, that link between effort and marginal gain, I think, is not really there. We haven't been able to tell a story about that. And I think building that story in each of these sectors and then adding it up so that you can see cumulatively what it means for air is really important, because each of these marginal changes won't make a dent by itself in air. So I think there is a knowledge and dissemination and understanding story that is probably part of this. I mean, this is where we entered this seminar series, and at least I haven't come out with the sense that need is not there. There are many, we got complexified, there are many other things, but that is the direction at least we're going to try and contribute, because I think that understanding then allows people to say, yes, I'm willing to change because I see a gain from changing. So that bridge is what at least I think we're going to be trying to focus on building a little bit. But we built a little bit of a community through this series. We might be in touch with you in various ways. But thank you all for your participation. Let me thank all three speakers. So thank you so much for stimulating this conversation, and thank you all for attending.